Hello and welcome. You're watching News Central Television. I am Judith TB. Here are stories making headlines just beyond the continent. And we begin with news in Europe, where President Donald Trump is set to announce sweeping tariffs on U.S. imports on April 2nd, which he has dubbed Liberation Day. While the specifics remain unclear, experts are concerned about the potential for a global trade war if U.S. trade partners retaliate with countermeasures. The tariffs could drive inflation and slow global growth. There's uncertainty over whether Trump will apply a universal tariff rate or target individual countries with a reciprocal tariff approach. Trump's trade moves, which have included 25% tariffs on steel, aluminum, and cars, are seen as part of his broader protectionist agenda aimed at revitalizing U.S. manufacturing and securing tax courts. His administration plans to impose duties reflecting the tariffs and trade barriers other countries place on U.S. exports. And now for more on this, I'm joined by international correspondent Dahieh. Dahieh, tell us, what exactly is Liberation Day?
Well, Judith, you've asked a good question. And to be honest, nobody really knows the answer. We really haven't had a situation where we've got this major piece of policy dropping in the U.S. government tomorrow. Nobody really knows what it's about. We know that it's to do with tariffs. We know that it's just 10 weeks after Trump assumed office, and he has said repeatedly, practically every single week, that he wants to raise tariffs on all products from countries that charge tariffs on U.S. exports. So he's going to hit all these countries around the world, and everybody around the world can expect to be affected with these tariffs, with these sweeping tariffs on all goods. And he claims that's going to fund an extraordinary revival of the U.S. economy. Now, he says it's the big one. Business leaders and economists are worried about the scale of this trade strategy. And you've got experts already telling us that it could knock U.S. gross GDP by roughly 0.7% and cost 500,000 United States jobs. So tomorrow's Liberation Day. He's going to do an address in the Rose Garden, the first of his second presidency, at 4 p.m. EST, where he will tell us more about why it's Liberation Day. And he says that as soon as the announcement is made, that the tariffs will come into force.
Interesting. And how are countries around the world reacting to the impending tariffs coming into effect?
Well, Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, gave a press conference a couple of hours ago in which she said that the president was very busy talking to leaders of lots of countries who were calling up to try and do their deals before the tariffs come into effect tomorrow. But countries around the world are introducing their own tariffs. China has a 10 to 15% tax on some U.S. agricultural goods. It's also targeted U.S. aviation, defense, and tech firms. Canada, the newest neighbor, has imposed a 25% tariff on U.S. steel, aluminium, and other goods, and that's worth about 60 billion Canadian dollars. Mexico has delayed introducing their own retaliatory tariffs while their negotiations continue. Now, the EU is targeting U.S. goods worth 26 billion euros, and those tariffs will start on the 13th of April. It's going to cover a wide range of products, from boots to bourbon to motorbikes, as well as steel and aluminium. The UK said that they are expecting that there will be tariffs and they will have to make retaliatory measures. But the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, said the UK is prepared for the worst and all options remain on the table. And I'm sure that we're going to hear more about that during Prime Minister's questions tomorrow.
And what will get more expensive if tariffs come into full force?
Lots of things, everything, cars, houses, lots of things that everyday American people buy. So cars especially, Trump has announced a 25% tax that would hit the import of cars and car parts from outside the country. So Honda, Hyundai, all these kind of brands. So they're going to go into force in April, May. So you could see about $4,000 on the price of a non-American car. Alcoholic drinks, popular Mexican brands like Corona could get more expensive. Spirits as well could have taxes on them. They've been largely free of tax since 1990, but supplies for spirits could be impacted, meaning the price will rise, and houses as well. Trump has said the US has plenty of lumber for house building, but the US still imports a third of its lumber from Canada. So if there's a tax on lumber, there's going to be a tax on housing, which means the houses will get more expensive.
And how have the stock markets been reacting to Liberation Day just 24 hours away? The U.S. stock markets haven't been doing so well, and now with the Liberation Day looming, I can only imagine.
Well, the stock market opened yesterday pretty down. It was pretty grim. The market was very, very nervous about what tomorrow would bring. Today, the markets are holding steady, so a slight improvement. The S&P 500 was up 0.44%, the Dow 0.81%, and the Nasdaq 0.85%. So up slightly on yesterday. But of course, we'll be keeping an eye on those movements as the day goes on and see where the stock market opens tomorrow on Liberation Day. We can expect the markets to be pretty jittery as that happens.
Well, only time will tell. 24 hours away. Everyone is looking forward to Liberation Day. Afia, many thanks for doing this with us. We appreciate you for coming in. Afia Hagen, our international correspondent, giving us some insight on what Liberation Day might just look like. Let's also tell you that the U.S. Democratic Senator Cory Booker delivered a passionate protest speech on the Senate floor more than 16 hours after he began his fiery criticism of President Donald Trump's unconstitutional actions late Monday. Booker, a former presidential candidate, took the floor at 7 p.m. Monday and continued speaking well into Washington's workday on Tuesday. His lengthy address highlighted his strong opposition to the president's policies as Booker sought to rally his colleagues and public against what he described as overreach and threats to democratic principles. His determined speech underscored his commitment to challenging the Trump administration's actions, drawing attention to what he sees as a critical constitutional fight.
And this man who's not acting like a president, but is trashing our constitutional traditions, is violating our laws as he's getting tied up in court, but ignoring court orders, and when he gets a decision he doesn't like, he trashes the judges so badly that the Supreme Court itself finds that it has to go out and tell him to stop it. What stopped health care from being taken away in the last time wasn't the persuasive powers of anybody in this side of the political aisle in the Senate convincing anybody over there. I would like to...
U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that he will be, quote, very kind to trading partners when unveiling further tariffs this week, despite the risk of global turmoil. Speaking in the Oval Office, Trump framed the move as a necessary step to address what he sees as unfair trade imbalances, calling it, quote, a rebirth of the country, end quote. The president signed an executive order on tariffs alongside musician Kid Rock, marking a highly symbolic moment in his administration's ongoing trade policies. The new measures are expected to escalate tensions with global trade partners as Trump continues to pursue his America First agenda.
I think this is going to be an amazing, I call it a lot of different names, but it's really, in a sense, it's a rebirth of a country, because how we could have afforded to do what we did, we helped everybody, and they don't help us. We are going to be very nice by comparison to what they were. The numbers will be lower than what they've been charging us, and in some cases maybe substantially lower, but we sort of have a world obligation perhaps. But we're going to be very nice. Relatively speaking, we're going to be very kind. Somebody said that about me the other day. They said, who doesn't know me very well, they said, you're such a kind person. And I said, say that again. They said, you're a kind person. I said, I've never heard that before. It was a weird statement. I was kind.
What's that?
I've heard of words that, I don't know, I better not tell you. You know, I've been called a lot of things, but it's sort of a different kind of a word. It's like an old-fashioned word, isn't it?
As world leaders anxiously await the details of U.S. President Donald Trump's planned tariffs, global markets have been shaken by the uncertainty. Set for implementation on April 2nd, the tariffs remain largely undisclosed, with investors bracing for the impact. The European Union has made it clear that it stands ready to retaliate, signaling a potential escalation of trade tensions. Meanwhile, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has urged for a calm and measured response, aiming to avoid any rash actions. In the Oval Office, Trump announced that the tariffs were settled and would be enacted on what he has called Liberation Day, adding to existing tariffs on aluminum, steel, vehicles, as well as Chinese goods.
Not started this confrontation. We do not necessarily want to retaliate, but if it is necessary, we have a strong plan to retaliate, and we will use it.
And in Oceania, the former Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull humorously mimicked Donald Trump during a speech on Tuesday, urging candidates in the upcoming May 3rd general elections to stand firm against U.S. influence. Turnbull led Australia when Trump took office in 2017, adopted a comedic American accent to capture Trump's distinctive manner. He also advised politicians to not be intimidated by potential criticism from the U.S. president. His remarks sought to encourage resilience and boldness among Australian election candidates, stressing that standing up for national interests is key to successful leadership. Earlier this year, Turnbull criticized Trump's return to office, calling it chaotic and erratic. Trump, in turn, criticized Turnbull as ineffective and weak, referring to his handling of China. The two leaders' relationship has always been strained.
You get a brickbat, okay? And that's what, that's the challenge for our leaders. And they've got to be able to stand up. And if that means you get a brickbat or a Truth Social post, saying you're weak and ineffectual, you don't know anything about China. Then you should. If you're spooked by that, you shouldn't be in the job. This is the thing. We've got to stop looking at our own country through the prism of Washington. We've got to start looking after ourselves. As I said, do you think if there was an Australian version of Donald Trump, do you think that person would be tiptoeing around worrying about offending the United States? Of course not.
Let's go on a short break, shall we? When we return, amid ceasefire deal, 4 killed in Israeli strike on Beirut, Lebanon. We have the details just after the break. Stay with us. And you're welcome back. It's off to Europe, where Russian President Vladimir Putin called for an unscheduled meeting of the Russian Security Council, where he asked Defense Minister Andrei Boluvas to provide a report on the implementation of agreements aimed at halting mutual strikes on energy facilities between Russia and Ukraine. This request comes as both countries grapple with the destruction of critical infrastructure. Putin's inquiry reflects a shift in focus towards managing the damage to vital energy resources, raising questions about the future of the ongoing conflict and the possibility of a more focused strategic approach to de-escalation.
Хотел бы задать вопрос Белоусу Андрею Рамовичу по поводу того, как у нас исполняются договоренности, связанные с прекращением взаимных ударов по энергосистемам между Россией и Украиной.
German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock says that Ukraine is prepared for a ceasefire without preconditions, but emphasized that Russian President Vladimir Putin is the one refusing to engage in such an agreement. The foreign minister comments come after a March 11th agreement between Ukraine and the United States for a 30-day ceasefire plan with Russia. However, Putin has rejected the U.S. proposal and escalated his rhetoric, now insisting that Moscow seeks to install new leadership in Ukraine. The situation remains tense, with diplomatic efforts facing significant challenges as the conflict continues.
Die Menschen in der Ukraine, die Menschen in Europa wollen nichts Sehnlicheres als Frieden. Die Ukraine hat deutlich gemacht, sie ist dazu nicht nur bereit, sondern sie akzeptiert einen Waffenstillstand ohne Vorbedingungen. Derjenige, der das nicht tut, ist der russische Präsident. Die Realität zeigt, Putins Strategie ist nicht Frieden, sondern weiter Zerstörung. Daran hat sich leider nichts verändert. Putin spielt auf Zeit. Er laviert sich aus Verhandlungen heraus, setzt seinen völkerrechtswidrigen Angriffskrieg fort und eskaliert mit brutalen Drohnenangriffen auf Häuser. Putin kann man in dieser Situation nicht trauen. Einen echten und nachhaltigen Frieden wird es erst geben, wenn der russische Präsident einsieht, dass er diesen Krieg nicht gewinnen kann, dass seine Zerstörung nicht erfolgreich ist.
Britain's government is placing Russia on the top tier of a government security program aimed at protecting the UK from malign foreign influence. This is according to Britain's Security Minister on Tuesday. Dan Jarvis told lawmakers that anyone or any company, quote, carrying out activity as part of any arrangement, end quote, with Russian authorities, including government agencies, armed forces, intelligence services, and the parliament, will need to register with the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme from July 1st or face 5 years in prison. Russian political parties that are controlled by the Russian government will also need to register before they can carry out activity in the UK directly.
With permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will make a statement on the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme. The Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, or FIRS, is a fundamental component of the National Security Act, which this House passed in 2023. The political tier requires the registration of arrangements to carry out political influence activities in the UK at the direction of
Home Secretary Chris Philp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I start by thanking the Security Minister for advance sight of his statement, which he...
Let's also tell you that Britain's second largest city, Birmingham, is facing a major crisis as the sanitation workers' strike has left more than 17,000 tons of uncollected garbage piling up on its streets. The City Council has now declared a major incident in an effort to tackle the worsening situation. News Central's international correspondent Afia Hagen has more.
Across Birmingham, uncollected waste is mounting on sidewalks, spilling from bins and creating a growing public health concern. The strike by sanitation workers, which began in January, shows no signs of ending, forcing the city to take drastic action. The dispute began late last year when garbage collectors, backed by Unite the Union, launched industrial action against pay cuts, overtime bans and the elimination of a key waste collection role. Birmingham City Council insists that workers have been offered alternative roles, driver training or voluntary redundancy, but the union argues that the council is forcing through unfair job cuts. With no agreement in sight, the strike has intensified, and efforts by the city to use temporary workers for garbage collection have been met with resistance. Striking workers have been blocking access to depots, preventing vehicles from reaching collection points, exacerbating the crisis. Declaring a major incident allows Birmingham to bypass these picket lines and move ahead with emergency clean-up measures. However, sanitation workers claim this amounts to strike breaking and accuse the city of refusing to negotiate a fair settlement. The British government says it's closely monitoring the crisis. Communities Minister Jim McMahon has stated that national support could be made available if local leaders request it. But for now, Birmingham remains locked in a standoff between city officials and striking workers. With no resolution in sight, Birmingham residents
are left dealing with growing piles of waste, and the battle over fair pay and working conditions is far from over. For News Central, I'm Afia Hagen.
Flash floods struck the Greek islands of Paros and Mykonos late on Monday, with officials reporting significant rainfall that was expected to continue on Tuesday. While no injuries have been reported, the floods caused extensive damage, especially in the fishing village of Narsa on Paros. Now, local authorities reported that a creek had overflowed, flooding homes, businesses, and sweeping away nearly 40 cars or 40 vehicles. Paros Mayor Castus Bizas, he indicated that the significant cleanup efforts would be needed with local roads covered in debris. He also expressed relief that no lives were lost during the disaster. The Civil Protection Agency issued a warning for residents to stay indoors, and schools across multiple islands were closed as a precaution. The storm, accompanied by gale force winds, is now moving toward other Greek islands, including Chios, Samos, and Ikaria. And off to the Middle East, where an Israeli airstrike on Beirut's southern suburbs has killed 4 people and injured 7, according to Lebanon's health ministry. Now, the strike, which targeted the Dahieh area, Hezbollah stronghold, raises concerns about the fragile ceasefire in place since November. Israel's military claimed the strike targeted Hezbollah operative Hassan Ali Mahmoud Bdeir, who allegedly assisted Hamas in planning attacks against Israeli civilians. Now, despite this justification, Lebanese officials, including its president and prime minister, condemned the attack as a violation of the ceasefire. The strike, which occurred without warning, damaged an apartment building, highlighting tensions as Israel continues its air campaign against Hezbollah, citing concerns over rearmament. Still in the Middle East, where a large fire broke out near Kuala Lumpur on Tuesday, forcing residents to evacuate during the Eid celebrations. Now, the blaze, which was visible from several kilometers away, originated from a gas pipeline leak approximately 500 meters long. The fire caused multiple homes to catch fire, prompting the rescue of 7 residents. Fortunately, no fatalities were reported, but the pipeline, operated by the state-owned oil company Petronas, was quickly shut off to prevent further damage. Emergency services responded rapidly to the situation, and residents nearby were alarmed by a loud explosion before the fire spread. People quickly evacuated their homes as the situation escalated, leaving behind their belongings in the chaos. Authorities are investigating the cause of the leak, and officials continue to assess the extent of the damage to the area. And that's all we can take from beyond the continent. Is back to the continent. Remember that you can send us your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number that is now showing on the screen. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on social media. We're at News Central TV. You can always watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422. We are now on GoTV channel 23. Find us on Star Times as well. We're on channel 274. We're also on Avo TV. Or better yet, you can just stream us live on YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Judith at TV. Good night.